So I'm just going to speak very briefly this morning, I think to help set the context for the panels that will follow this morning on some of the container trade, the bulk, the auto, and possibly a little bit about the cruise trade. But I think it's safe to say, really just to set the context, that the port is booming. The Port of New York and New Jersey is doing remarkably well. This year it follows on 2 years of strong growth, and what was in 2015 a double-digit growth in the Port of New York and New Jersey that was, quite frankly, hard to sustain, but was actually doable. So what we've seen in 2018 so far is month over month growth that exceeds the previous year, 2017. And we're looking, in terms of a year to date, we're looking at volumes that are over 2017 in the area of about 7% on the containerized trade. Unlike other ports, I think that some other ports in the United States this year have been experiencing a decline in containerized volume as a result of the tariff concerns, tariff wars. We have not seen a decline yet as a result of the tariff wars, and quite frankly, we don't really expect to see any. Most of the cargo that, while China represents about a third, if not a little bit more of our cargo, we have not seen a remarkable decline or change in the Chinese market, but instead we have seen an increase in cargo that's being traded with Spain, India, Vietnam, and Singapore. So with all of that increase in cargo, again, we're seeing year to date just about 7% increase. At the same time as our container volume is going strong, our volumes in vehicle traffic remain strong as well. Year to date, we're up in vehicle traffic by 3.6%, and in the cruise traffic, we're up as well. And finally, in the bulk commodities, while we do not handle any of the petrochemical trades, we are handling a number of the bulk commodities like salt, Belgian block, scrap metal that in the past may have been going to China is now going predominantly to Turkey. So the supply chain is fixing itself and reacting and responding to what's going on in global trade, and alternative suppliers or alternative destinations have been identified. It's important to note, since the last time we were here last year, when we were here last year, we were talking about what was then the most recent completion of the Bayonne Bridge. The Bayonne Bridge Navigational Clearance Project that was completed last June and celebrated in September of 2017 with the arrival of the CMA CGM Teddy Roosevelt. That was a 14,414,000 TEU class vessel, the largest ever to call at that point on the US East Coast. The Teddy Roosevelt and I hesitate to say her sisters because they're all named after US presidents, but her sisters, John and Teddy and Franklin, are all now calling the US East Coast at 14,400 Ts. There has been an increase in services, containerized services, again, coming to the US. There are 3 or 4 new services, depending on how you count those services. We've seen the consolidation of the ocean carriers continuing to consolidate the lines, consolidate the services, consolidate the routes. So whereas 2 or 3 of the alliance partners may have been calling the same string of ports, now they're reducing those, and those carriers are calling those same strings perhaps just 2 times. With that, we've seen the rationalization of ocean carriers calling New York and New Jersey now upwards of 78% of the time. So of the U.S. East Coast services, 78% of the time, those ocean carriers are coming to New York and New Jersey first. And depending on the class of the vessel, the size of the vessel, they're dropping anywhere between 45 and 70% of the vessel's capacity here in New York and New Jersey. So it's not unusual now for us to see lifts at our larger container terminals upwards of the 11,000, 12,000 lifts or exchanges at a time. So that is significant. And I'm very happy to say that our terminal operators have been able to handle, to date, these surges of activity without much concern whatsoever. A number of things continue favorably in being able to handle this volume that we're talking about. Across the board, the container terminals are all continue to invest heavily in new cargo handling equipment, in new gate systems, in new terminal operating systems. Any and all of the areas that the terminal operators can invest in order to make the terminals more efficient and more productive and provide a higher level of customer service and throughput for the customers, the terminal operators are committed to doing so. We are nearing the completion of a 30-year master plan. That 30-year master plan is doing what my predecessors, actually I was a part of it, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were thinking about what was life going to be like in 2015, 16, 17, and what did we need to do in order to prepare for that time frame. That was the beginning of what became our 50-foot harbor deepening project, what became the investment in our on-dock rail facilities, new roadways, roadway capacity, the raising of the Bayonne Bridge. So today, in 2018, we're thinking about what will life look like in the Port of New York and New Jersey in 2025, 2035, 2045. And through our Port Master Plan that we anticipate rolling out on a select basis to the stakeholders that we had engaged in the market analysis and data collection phase, we expect by the end of next month we will be rolling that back out on a limited basis to those partners that we had engaged with to kind of just check and do a reality check to make sure that we got everything correctly. But we are looking at a potential market growth of anywhere doubling to tripling our container volume. So by 2046, 2047, we anticipate upwards between 12 to 17 million TEUs will be moving through the Port of New York and New Jersey. How do we anticipate doing that? That's all about what we're going to do in terms of the investment that we and our terminal operators will make in the future in order to handle that. Not a lot of place to grow, not a lot of empty land available near the waterfront so that we can continue to expand those facilities or create new facilities. So we have to use the facilities that we have in a better, smarter, more efficient way. Today, our container terminals on average are operating, let's say between 10 and 12 hours a day, just 5 days a week. Part of our future and the ability to handle that capacity and that demand is going to come from longer hours. The efficiencies that we will see gained from appointment systems, and I'm sure Bob will talk about the appointment system, at least that's in place at GCT Bayonne today. We anticipate next year having that same or a similar appointment system rolled out, at least in 2 other container terminals. We're talking to the warehouse and distribution centers in terms of how do we make the supply chain more efficient and how do we ensure that the entire supply chain can handle these longer hours and that there is in fact a place for these containers to move if we are operating on a second shift or potentially on a Saturday or Sunday. It also begs the question to say, should we be operating today at 6 o'clock in the morning until 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night when everyone else is commuting, as I just experienced? And maybe we should be operating, a little bit more in the off hours, where we're starting at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and we can get the first slug of containers in or out before the commuters are on the road. I talked briefly in the beginning about the Marine Highway. We really believe that the time has come for the Marine Highway to grow its legs in the Port of New York and New Jersey, both within the region and to other North Atlantic or Mid-Atlantic ports. And I don't want to steal the thunder that I'm sure is going to come from Ryan and Mike. The last thing that I would say as we look at this is we need to consider, and it's a little bit outside of the Port Authority's area of responsibility, with the exception of potentially the port facilities that are going to be used for it. But there's quite a bit of development going on now in terms of offshore wind and offshore wind capabilities. And both the New York governor and the New Jersey governor have set goals for the short term in terms of 2025 and 2030 in terms of the capabilities of how much energy will be supplied by the offshore wind industry. Our port facilities in New York and New Jersey are ripe to be used to support this development that's going on from New England down to Baltimore. So there's plenty of discussion that's going on in terms of the facilities and how they will be used. And that, too, will change things in the North Atlantic, in New York and New Jersey. When we think about a third of our homes' energies being supplied not by fossil fuel but by alternative fuels, when we think about the move towards electrification of vehicles, electrification of trucks, those types of things are all going to change the way that our industry and our lives operate in the future, and those are all part of what we're considering now in terms of being prepared with the future. So since I'm so late, I will give up my last minute and thank you all for coming today, coming to be a part of this important dialogue, and I look forward to hearing what my colleagues have to say in terms of the rest of the presentations this morning, particularly on the container trade. So thank you all.